This is You're Probably Right. Entertainment first, everything else is just bonus.
That's right.
Opinions, all ours. Sometimes backed by research, but never the final word. There are always exceptions, so take it with a grain of salt and a slight dusting of chili powder. If something in this episode resonates with you or you want to reach out directly, you can email the show at yprpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find the podcast on Facebook. Just search You're Probably Right podcast and the page should come up. And if you are listening somewhere other than Spotify, you can find the show there as well. Just search You're Probably Right and follow the podcast so new episodes show up automatically. All right, let's get into it.
Hey, y'all, what's up? It is MCM, and this is You're Probably Right podcast. Sorry. Hopefully my microphone doesn't sound any different, but it very well could sound different. I'm using one of those, what do you call it? Shure SM7B microphones, the ones that you see that most podcasts use, you know, the big black one. If you don't know, I mean, if you know, you know. But I changed the settings on it. There's two switches that sit at the back of the microphone. If you ever wonder what those weird lines are at the back of, there's actually two things that you can flick up or down, and I have flicked them both down. I was trying to get some high notes. I was trying to do a cover of a song, and I noticed that every time I hit like the high falsettos, like probably higher than somebody with my voice should have, I suppose, it totally just goes off the scale and it doesn't record. So I've been trying to work with this thing. I'm starting to believe that it's just my equipment that can't handle it to a certain extent. But anyways, whatever. It is what it is. The bottom line is I haven't changed it back. So if I sound a little bit off, well, it is what it is. All right, let me get back to it. So another thing before I get into this long episode. I just wanted you, my listeners, to know. First of all, I'd like to welcome you to You're Probably Right. If you're not familiar with this podcast, this is a podcast that's been running for, I would say, almost 6 years, basically. I think, was it 21? Anyhow, I'm Canadian. I am a descendant of Africans to Jamaica. My parents came over here in the 60s, into Canada in the 60s. My dad lived in England, and he also lived in Florida for a while, in Boston. Before coming here, my family came to Canada officially in 1965. So I am the recipient of the amazing Canadian heritage, I guess now. Like people like Drake and Justin Bieber and Shea Gildress Alexander and what's that Marie basketball player? I can't remember. Anyhow, so I understand that most of my listeners are American, but I realize that there are a lot, well, not a lot, but when I check out the percentages, there are a lot of people from around the world. So, and I do appreciate that, of course, but I just want to let you know, I'm not American. I'm not an American. I'm North American, but my ideas may not be exactly how yours are. I'm not a liberal. I don't believe in a social gospel. I just believe in the straight up gospel. This podcast is not a Christian podcast, but it is a podcast by a Christian. So I do realize that most of my episodes have nothing to do with Christianity. This one will be slightly different because you see the name of the episode. So I will get into I guess relationships in a sense, but I'm going to talk straightforward today. And not that I don't usually talk straightforward, but sometimes I kind of ignore the side of me, I guess, that probably matters the most. Not probably matters the most. I sometimes I just come on here riffing about different things that I've experienced and different things that I've learned and different things that I've seen. But I leave out that side of me a lot of the time. I'm just riffing. So I just wanted to say that. I'm not sure if that invites you to want to hear more, but this is the person that you are listening to. And I thought sometimes it's a good thing for me to almost reintroduce myself. I mean, if you listen to one of the 312 other episodes of this podcast, you'll learn a lot about me, but you'd have to do a lot of listening. So I just wanted to give you that little piece of information. So, anyways, let me say something that most believers are too polite to say out loud. If you play the devil's rules or by the devil's rules, you won't win. Straight up. I know I like this, like, I got not as a born again Christian. Now, what is a born again Christian? Is the same thing as being a Christian or a follower of Christ. Sometimes when you use that born again Christian name, people try to differentiate, between a Christian and a born again Christian. No, all Christians are born again. That's because that's what the word of God says. That's what the Bible says. The 66 books of the Bible. That's what I'm referring to when I say the Bible, and that's what I refer when I say the word of God. Okay. So anyways, you can't win if you play by the devil's rules. Not in the long term. You might have had or might have what you think of as a good relationship. Maybe your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend doesn't believe in the same God and everything is supposedly hunky-dory. But I can honestly tell you, in the long run, you will not win. And I know that's kind of harsh to start off with, but I got to put it out there. I don't want to be toting lies. You know what I mean? Anyhow, listen.
If this sounds familiar, follow the show so this kind of thinking stays close.
All right. Listen, you can flirt with the world's structure. You can borrow rhythm. You can dip into its dating culture, but you can't live by secular rules and expect spiritual peace. It just doesn't happen. You might get chemistry, yes, between people because you're both human. You both have tendencies. You both have characteristics that are human and natural, of course. You might get attention. You might get intimacy, but you will not get alignment. And alignment is the only thing that actually sustains. You see, rejection hurts, right? But misalignment corrodes, as I've said in a previous episode. Sometimes what feels like abandonment is actually exposure of where you're compromised, exposure of where you ignored conviction, exposure of where you told yourself it's not that deep, when deep down you know it was. Two cannot walk together unless they agree. That is not romantic advice. That is spiritual. That is from the Bible, actually. You should Google it. If you believe in the 66 books of the Bible, you understand that that's instruction. It's not inspirational quotes like from Einstein or some person of history. It's spiritual. It's from God. And if you do, and you believe that word, then you cannot build something lasting on a lasting foundation that ignores that instruction. And here's the uncomfortable part. Although I'm sure you're probably already uncomfortable at some level. Remember, I'm just sitting here drinking coffee, guys. So just in case you're wondering. When you know better and still step into secular dating dynamics, the pain hits differently. Not just because you lost them, that person, right? But because you ignored something inside of yourself. You thought intimacy meant attachment. You thought the closeness meant covenant. Felt like that probably. You thought that vulnerability meant permanence, and then one day, silence. No argument, no explosion, just absence. And maybe it's 3 days, maybe it's a week, maybe it's a month, however long. I'll just stick with a week and just, go off of that. So when I'm referring to this type of dynamic, it's where you say you were dating someone or seeing someone or in a situationship or whatever they call them, those things these days. And all of a sudden the person kind of just pops and fizzles out of your life. Maybe people would call it ghosting, but then not necessarily, because maybe you just had to go away. Maybe you were sick and this person didn't seem to care. This person didn't seem to check up on you. And it seems like your relationship just kind of just withered away. Okay, so that's the dynamic that I'm kind of speaking to, even though I get obviously a lot deeper. Okay, here we go. So segment 1, the shock of realization. Rejection without conflict is disorienting. If someone cheats, right, you have anger, of course. If someone betrays you publicly, you have a story. If someone insults you, you have evidence. But when someone just withdraws, you are left arguing with yourself, or you're arguing basically with silence. So I have 30 questions that I'm going to do my best to answer from my experiences. So again, if you are a listener thinking that you know me, maybe you know me personally, maybe you're my family, or you're my neighbor, or you're someone I work with, or whatever it is, understand that I'm going to be drawing from different relationships over my long life. So trying to handicap it, well, if I said any names or was going to say any other name, any names, they've all been changed to protect the innocent. And if you are the innocent, then here we go. All right. Anyhow, listen. First question. When did I first feel the imbalance, and why did I override it? I would say I felt that imbalance early on. Early on in conversations where the person didn't necessarily have a good foundational belief in who God is, who people are. Um, I can honestly say that, for instance, one situation where the person just took exception to thinking that people were inherently wicked and born in iniquity, shaped in iniquity, as the Bible says. People who believe that people are inherently good. It was one of those situations. Or another situation where a person said they were a believer, but they did nothing that would make you believe that was so, because there was nothing that would show you that they were walking according to any precepts or any laws or any rules that had anything to do with Christianity. All right, so listen, there's always a moment in a dynamic like that where there's hesitation, there's a gut feeling, a small inconsistency, something you notice, but of course you brush it aside because you're human and because you have human needs and desires and lusts and feelings, that you tend to just kind of brush what you have in your heart aside for other reasons. And the problem with that is when you do that, you're going against what you believe, and you pretty much set yourself down a road where, trouble at some point is going to meet you. Why? Was it hope? Was it ego? Was it a fear of losing them? Maybe you don't stand or die on that hill, as they say, in a conversation, because you're trying not to run the person off. You know what I mean? So that would be why you didn't override it, even though you felt there was an imbalance already at the beginning. Generally during the get to know you questions and conversations, you usually know, or you have, as I said, a gut feeling, but you override it. Maybe you've been alone for a long time, and maybe this person is exactly in the natural what you would like as as a mate. Maybe they're good looking, maybe they have a good personality, maybe they have a good sense of humor, maybe they're the right height, the right size, the right shape, they got the right job, the right complexion, the right hair. You know what I mean? Maybe they got all of these things, but at the end of the day, there's that deepness, there's that spiritual awareness or spiritual awakeness, or alive, or they're spiritually alive, but or maybe they're not spiritually alive, but they have all of these other things, I should say, that you try to just override that thing. You think, oh, maybe one day they'll believe. Maybe, as it says that a believing husband sanctifies an unbelieving wife, or you try to use the scriptures to try to meld the thing together so that it can work. And I'm not saying that it's never happened where somebody is dating a person who's not a believer, and you know and the person becomes a believer, because that does happen, but I would say not usually. That's just the way it works. One's going to go one way and the other's going to go another way. And every once in a while, the two will go in the same direction. But that would be, the person would have to be destined for that from before they were in their mother's womb. The Lord says that He knew us. Christian will know what I mean. All right, moving right along. Hold on a second. Okay. Second question. Was I aligned spiritually with this person or just emotionally attached? And I would say for sure, emotionally attached, because maybe we cared about the same things. Maybe we cared about each other's plight, each other's situations. And as I said before, the characteristics of our character kind of went together. And now, whether I was lacking or whether they had moved up in not maybe in just a moral way, so it seemed like we were on the same page. But it's easy to work those things out to find out where you really are if you really have serious conversations. And sometimes you don't want to have those conversations because, as I said, sometimes it's been a while, and you get tired of just being, you know and you're hoping that something can change. So you try not to push the envelope, the spiritual envelope, so much because you don't want to scare someone who you think is a good match away a lot of the time. I think that's probably the biggest thing with Christians, I would say, is that they try not to push the the Jesus card too hard on somebody who's not necessarily a unbeliever, or someone who maybe believes in, a god of maybe the Torah or the Quran. So they have some semblance of spiritual understanding of a creator who created the heavens and the earth, but then it kind of totally veers off not too far after basically after the Old Testament, but in the Old Testament as well. um Number three, and as I said, attachment, listen, it feels strong, you know. Alignment, it feels steady. They're not the same thing though. And again, alignment comes with your spiritual side of you. When it comes to being a Christian, it's a total different thing of just being aligned if you are unbeliever. And even those, people will say they believe in a God, and then some people say they're an atheist, and even they have issues. So you imagine if you actually believe in the living God who created the heavens and the earth, and then you're someone who believes that Jesus was a sinner and he didn't die for the sins of men, and he's not alive and sitting at the right hand of God. Do you understand? Like, there's just you're just going in two different places. Everything's just different, you know? just admiring something in the sky. I'm looking at two planes that look like they're identical, except one has a huge trail behind it and the other one has nothing behind it. I'm like, okay, where's the trail behind that one? Anyways, what do I know? Okay, next question. Did we share the same governing authority in life or just chemistry? And I can again say that for me, it was just chemistry. And it was to, again, a certain extent. I can say that a lot of the time people are attracted to people who are Christians, um, generally because most Christians, or well, all Christians have there's a family dynamic, and that family dynamic is from the family of God. So usually, there's some meekness there, there's some humbleness there, there's love there, right? Because once you become a Christian, um the heavenly Father is your father, and the Son, we're in fellowship with the Son through the Holy Spirit. So therefore we have like characteristics of our Father. So, when it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, who is Jesus, right? You have to understand that we also, through the spirit of adoption, are um, in the family as well. And therefore, we have those once we let the light, Jesus is the light of the world. Once we let that light shine through us, there is something attractive just from that alone when it comes to being a Christian. And people will be attracted to that. People living in the dark will see your light. It says that we should let that light shine before men, and they will glorify the Father, your Father which is in heaven, you understand? So, but again, we are human. So a lot of those amazing new characteristics of the new life that is in us shines in front of people, and people tend to gravitate to you. Some people will hate you, of course, because I wonder, why are you so forgiving? Why are you so loving? Why do you help so much? Um, why are you able to hold down a conversation without cursing your head off? There's just so many things. There's always something different. We're a peculiar people, the Bible says, right? So we tend to draw people towards us, other believers a lot of the time, but a lot of people who are not believers as well, because they're not accustomed to people like us. We're different. You understand? A royal priesthood. And listen, again, this is not a Christian podcast, right? This is just a podcast by a Christian. I usually don't go down this road, or up this road, probably sounds better. But again, I think it's necessary that I do from time to time, because otherwise it just sounds like I'm just worldly, and like, what is the basis if it's just science and attachment theories and all that other stuff? I'm way, 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 way deeper than all that stuff. So when it says, did we share a governing authority? I would say in my situation, no. And I can tell you from being in countless relationships like that, yes, you have chemistry, but your stuff's gonna go to the wayside at some point, when you really, really, if you ever really have a real conversation and get down to the nitty gritty, it's just not going to work. I'm just saying it, and I believe that I have a responsibility to say it straight up. We can go according to attachment theories. We can go according to characters, character traits. We can talk about was it Myers Briggs? What is it? We could talk about so many different things, even the big five that Jordan Peterson was talking about, or so many different measuring sticks. But honestly, at the end of the day, it comes down to who you are and what authority governs your actual life, the rules that you live by, the precepts and the the map that you have before you in front of your face, guiding you through life. So if one person answers to scripture and the other answers to preference or some other book, someone will eventually have no choice but to shrink. It's just that simple. So it's either your beliefs are going to shrink for you to get along with that person, or their things are they're going to have to shrink for you to walk with them, right? Question number 4. Was I building covenant while they were enjoying convenience? I would say, hmm, and I'm just thinking of me, so that's why I'm literally going back into my mind. I don't want to be just here being fake with you guys. I don't want to just be here trying to spit out spiritual um knowledge or notions of what I think or believe, and then you don't really feel like the human behind it. Because if I do that, then I just feel like I'm being like everybody else. And why am I doing a podcast at all? You know what I mean? So I'm really like, when you hear me kind of racking my brain or you hear nothing, that probably means I'm trying to rack my brain to give you a honest, heartfelt answer, because I believe that somebody out there, some people out there, have probably gone through some of the stuff that I've gone through, and they haven't always found support from people who've been through the same types of things, you know? So that's what this episode is really about, I would say, and most of my episodes are about. So let's go again so I can read it and remind myself, but I always feel the need to let you know what's going on behind here and behind this microphone. Let's see. Was I building a covenant while they were enjoying it? I would say yes. I would say honestly, I was trying to build some sort of a covenant, and that's the cloudy part, the gray part. I was trying to build some sort of, because unless we come along and believe and put our and subject ourselves under the same type of covenant, same type of belief system, the same type of new life in Christ, then we're going to be trying to build. But I mean, unless you build your house upon the rock, you're building your house upon the sand. And, if you build a house on the sand, it's eventually some tide's going to come through and knock that house away, and it'll be like it never existed. And for me, I believe that, yes, the person was out of convenience. Um, I'm not a stranger to that. And many of you are not strangers to that, where maybe somebody, sees all those wonderful things inside of you. Maybe you're a guy and you have a great job, and you're a provider, you're a protector, you have good genes, you are funny, you are smart, and you're from the right culture, maybe, or whatever it is, and somebody latches onto you because of those things, but not because of actually who you are. And maybe you didn't necessarily, in my case, right, present exactly who I was, because not trying to be nefarious or not trying to be sneaky, not trying to be tricky, but it's like, at the same time, it's like sometimes you get this false sense of you're wasting time, and a false sense that you're gonna have to make lemonade out of a lemon in many cases. Not calling anybody a lemon, but you're trying to like create something out of nothing. That's even worse. um, you're just trying to build something with someone who is not trying to build the same type of structure. How about that? You're trying to build a castle and they're trying to build a mud hut, or they're trying to build a building and you're trying to build a duplex. Just because you're trying to build two different things, you're going to need different things to build those structures. And if you don't have the right foundation on what you're trying to build upon, there's going to be a problem. That's a nicer way of putting it, right? um, and that question hurts because it exposes timing differences. You may have been planning, they may have been just passing time, right? Maybe they're just on to the next one. Maybe they're supposedly broken out of a relationship and you try to pick up the pieces because it's part of your new DNA to be a fixer, a restorer, a healer. You understand? You have that in you as a believer. So therefore you'll end up picking up a lot of broken people. You'll try to help and fix a lot of sick, spiritually sick people, mentally sick people, because there is something shining within you that is different. A lot of broken people, a lot of people with mental health issues will gravitate to Christians. And that's just a fact. Number 5, did I compromise small convictions to keep peace? Of course. As I said, um, and I'm just being real again, like you're a believer and you believe in the Bible, and you have, maybe you've picked up or you've met someone who says they believe in God, they believe in a creator. It's like, okay, well, let's see if we can make it work. Meanwhile, there's this whole big fat Bible that this person doesn't know anything about. And Christianity has nothing to do with just cultural. I know that people think like they'll come to Canada or the United States and say that, it's a Christian country. No, it isn't. Now, yes, they were originally founded on the beliefs from the Bible. And when people used to swear in the courtroom, it'd be on a Bible, supposedly saying that they believe or they can attest to the things that are in it. Many people haven't even read it. And when you get into a relationship and you're talking to someone and maybe it's a guy and he doesn't know that he has certain responsibilities. He doesn't know that he needs to be able to or be willing to lay down his life for his wife. He doesn't know that he needs to leave his family and cleave to his wife and what that really means. Or maybe it goes vice versa, where maybe it's you're a guy and you pick up a woman and she doesn't know that she needs to humble herself and treat you like your Lord over her in her life. And she doesn't understand that she's supposed to be submissive to you like the church is submissive to the Christ. And for a lot of people, that's like, what the heck? That goes against my liberal beliefs. And you could turn their life upside down just because you're trying to make something work that you already know deep down inside that it doesn't work. Usually, you don't usually break spiritually in one big decision. You erode in small ones. You bypass things that a lot of the time that are wrong, probably because of loneliness, lust, and other things. And it's sad because you're really, really trying to make something work that in most cases is not going to work. Yes, you can present the Bible, you can present the gospel to a person who is not a believer, and they may believe. That can happen. But a lot of the time when you don't start that up front, you got problems, right? If you get into a relationship and you decide to go along with your carnal lusts and feelings and desires, and then you try to hit them over the head with the Bible 6 months in or when she's pregnant, then you're going to have problems. And again, I'm just being as honest and as straightforward with this conversation as I can possibly be, because a lot of the time we're out there as Christians or believers, and we're fooling ourselves, and we're fooling the people that we're in relationship with as well. And this goes to people who call themselves Baptists, Southern Baptists, people who are maybe 5-point Calvinists, people who are Lutherans. The list goes on. And sometimes it's like you're forgetting part of who you are to be apart with someone who doesn't know who you really are, doesn't even know what you believe. Maybe you tell them to start reading the Bible, maybe, but then they need to sit down underneath teaching till they can understand the scriptures properly. You can't just say, here's a Bible, read it, and we're good. Nah, it doesn't work that way. All right. Number 6, if two could not walk together unless they agree, where exactly were we disagreeing? And again, I would say just understanding what the scriptures say. There's a carnal a carnal view of how things are supposed to go, and then there's a God's way of how things are supposed to go. So it won't be like surface disagreements. A lot of the time you'll find people who believe a lot of the same things that you do as a Christian, but when you really get to the core of things, you'll find out that there's a lot different. So yes, the worldview and faith, authority, accountability, all that stuff changes when you're a believer, and you'll find out a lot of the time that you'll have all kinds of issues with people who are not believers just based on that alone. Because sometimes rejection isn't them walking away. A lot of time it's you finally seeing the disagreement that was there the whole time, but you tried to, you tried to sip and skip. You tried to have your cake and eat it too, you know? And I know this is a tough conversation, and maybe it's not exactly for you, but I would say honestly, pass this podcast episode on to someone that it can help in some way. I'm not preaching, even though it sounds like I'm preaching. I'm just honestly just talking. You know what I mean? I'm not a preacher. I'm not a minister. Just a believer, just a guy. You know. Okay. Segment 2. The giving trap. Now, we need to talk about giving because giving feels noble. Giving feels strong. Giving feels like love. But sometimes giving is control in disguise. Now, if you are again a believer and you believe in giving and giving makes you feel good, there's something about giving. Most Christians are used to giving. They're used to giving help, giving love, giving money, giving of themselves, and neglecting themselves at times and denying themselves certain things at times. And I think again, it's like being Christ-like in a sense where, we know for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. And I believe that because we are new creations through Christ, that we have this also inside of this sacrificial giving inside of us as well. That's not natural. It's not normal. So of course people are going to gravitate to that because who doesn't want to receive in this natural world where many times love is not given freely, things are not given freely. There is an abundance over here, but there's a lot of people who don't have enough over here. And the people will come across believers who will give out of their own need, and that's not a normal type of giving. Do you understand? Like in most cases, unless person's like obsessed with a person, in most cases they're not gonna give out of their need. They're not gonna give you $200 out of the 300 that they have, or you know what I mean. They're not going to give till it hurts. In most cases, most natural cases, people don't do that, and a lot of Christians do that, and it already almost puts us at it puts us at a what do you call it, it puts us behind like behind a gun almost. It puts us at a disadvantage because we're willing to give, we're willing to love, we're willing to do, we're willing to sacrifice. And a lot of people will take advantage of that alone. almost feel bad saying it on here, almost like if there's some weird person listening. Oh, so I should go find a Christian to fool them. Well, also it says be harmless. What is it? Harmless as a dove or a lamb, and as wise as a serpent. I can't remember what the scripture says. I'm sure you can Google that and figure out what it says. um, Number 7. Did I give to express love or to secure belonging? And again, you see, we are supposed to give to express love. Love within us, the love of God that flows through us. But sometimes, again, we do become lonely. We do have needs like other people on this planet. So sometimes we do it to secure belonging, and that's the wrong thing right there. You're not giving to entreat someone, to care about you, to desire you, to choose you. You give because you're giving to love, so that if it doesn't come back, because we're told to give and not even expect back, but if you're giving to receive belonging, to receive being chosen, you're already off on a tangent and you're going in the wrong direction already, right from the get-go. There's a huge difference. One is generosity and love, right? And one is basically negotiation, or like a barter system or a transaction. And the latter will put you in that worldly category, and a lot of the time, again, it just will not work. You could try if you want to. Let's take it from someone who's been there and done that. I've failed for all of you. Okay, 8. If I had stopped giving, what would have been left? And that's a good question for, I think, a lot of people who've been through, bad, damaged relationships, maybe with a person who says they're a believer, but nothing in their life shows that, or maybe you've been with a person who didn't believe at all, you know? And ask yourself, if you weren't always giving, right? Giving of your time, giving of emotional support, giving of maybe money, giving of your life energy, what would have been left in that relationship, really? What would it be? What would it be based on? You know? And I can just honestly, from my, if I wasn't doing all those things, I think honestly it would just, in many cases, just be based on lust, just based on feeling and what I see, and and all that, which isn't nothing good, especially if you're dealing with someone who is dealing with a different type of lifestyle, different spiritual aliveness. Somebody who's spiritually dead. You're just not heading in the right direction. They're wonderful and happy when you're giving and doing and all that stuff, but if you take that away, you got to ask yourself, what is left? Why? Because you both like walking your dog and going for long walks on the beach and sitting in the sunshine and getting torched by the sun. Or maybe you work at the same place, or you go to the same school, you're in the same course, maybe same occupation, but it's like, what else do you have? There's hundreds and thousands of other people doing some of the same exact things. Like, what do you have besides those things? If you stop all the emotional giving, all the emotional availability, all the problem solving, all the giving that you've put into that person's life, you stop all that, what do you have left? Number 9, was I chosen or was I available? Well, I would honestly say I think I was available. I wasn't chosen. I made myself available. Availability sometimes is just proximity. You just happen to be there. Chosen is more of priority, and you can't confuse those things. Whereas, if you're chosen, generally the other person is not too busy for you. Even if they're busy, they'll find a place in their life for you at no matter what time. That's the hard thing to sometimes to really accept for a lot of people, because when you find yourself being put to the side or other people in their life being put in front of you, you find out that, yeah, it's proximity and convenience, but a lot of time it's not. You're not really chosen. You just happen to work at that time, and sometimes that's really hard to say, really. But I'm dealing with the real, not giving you the Disney today, guys. Not that I really do ever, but extra real maybe. Keeping it 100. Okay, 100. All right, 10. Did I confuse sexual intimacy with spiritual unity? For me personally, no, because I know that they're totally different. But what I can tell you, and it's kind of funny the way the laws are. Like I noticed that I watch a lot of cop videos. It's very interesting. It's not like watching the old school cops where everything, things are clipped out, and although they do redact people's names and sometimes they hide people's faces or even what their house looks like, phone numbers and stuff. But the new type of crime all in kind of videos or whatever it is, or crime in all, I think, video, that YouTube channel, um they just give you the story exactly how it plays out. People go and they buy these cop cams, the cameras that police wear, and they literally buy those videos from, I guess, the police station or whoever they buy it from, and then they put them on a YouTube channel. They explain a little bit what's going to happen, and then they just let it run. And what I've found out with the way the law works, if you are in an intimate relationship with another person, and let's say you get into a fight, the laws totally switch and change for you. In other words, if you're on the street and you're arguing about an ice cream cone to somebody who jumped in line from in front of you, and you guys started to fist it out in the middle of the street, you are mutual combatants, and you both can decide not to press charges, and cops can just tell you to go, maybe give you a warning and send you your on your opposite ways. Of course, everything has to be equal, right? You can't like stomp a person into the dust. You will be with attempted manslaughter or assault or something if you really, really damage somebody else. You have a right to protect yourself in a, what's it called, a reasonable way, like a reasonable amount of force back. But of course, if you totally overpower the person and you keep finishing them, like, Mortal Kombat style, yeah, you're gonna go to jail. But if it's just two people and you got lumps and they got lumps and you're not in an intimate relationship, a lot of the time you can just, okay, go your separate ways and move on with life. But if you are in an intimate relationship, usually what they would call sexual, or if you're in a family, right, that whole thing switches. And the reason why is because they know that there is a difference. Crimes of passion are totally different from just regular malfeasance or regular crime or regular issues or problems or disagreements or struggles, you know? And this is critical, right? Sex bonds, that is biological, and it also is spiritual. And remember, covenant binds, and that is, again, spiritual. So although most people, again, would look at it, sex, as biological, it's also spiritual. And that puts kind of like the double, you know, it's double. It's double important. There's a double bond there. And bonding without binding creates illusion. So in other words, it makes you believe, feel, and think that there's something there that really isn't there. Illusion creates attachment to something or to someone, even though it's not really there. It looks like it and feels like it, might even smell like it. Attachment without covenant, without mutual understanding, beliefs, creates suffering. 11. Did I feel peace in this relationship or adrenaline? It's another question you have to ask yourself. Peace is slow. Adrenaline is intense. Many people mistake intensity for destiny. You know, a lot of the time, you're in a relationship and maybe it's not all bells and whistles and fireworks, but there's a peace about it. There's a long lasting togetherness, oneness in there. But when it's adrenaline, you just go from 0 to 100 real quick. And it's intoxicating. It's a rush. It's a high. And again, anybody who has had to take medication because they were sick, or maybe you've taken other types of substances that maybe you should have had no dealings with, but it's different from just being regular and just being happy and just being at peace. There's a wonderful thing, a wonderfulness in that. But if you are like, there's a difference between jumping up and touching a basketball rim at 10 feet, if you ever have, and then there's jumping up and touching the moon. Now, when you grab the rim and you come down from 10 feet, you can handle it. It's not that high, right? But if you jump and you touch the moon, try falling from that. It's a whole different landing experience. And again, that is something that you could probably look at. So when there's adrenaline, you got to go up. And intensity and feelings and all these things go up. But when you come down, boy, do you come down. Got to go up again. You understand? And it's something that it's like you're always trying to hit that high. If you're in a relationship that you're not supposed to be in, it works out that way. A lot of the time, everything is amazing for the first 3 months, and then you spend the rest of that time in that relationship trying to get back to the first 3 months. And for some reason, when you're mixed or when you're unequally yoked, as the scriptures would say, you never really get back to those first 3 months. But some people will do their darndest, as they say, and work hard to get back there. Some might even get a little close, but you don't really quite get back there. Whereas if you are steadily at peace, you are content. And I think somehow along the lines, along the world's travels, somehow contentment, it just doesn't sound that exciting. It's just not a sexy word. It's just not it's just not exciting. It's not exciting. you know but it is satisfying. It is peaceful. It is happy. You can find your best friend in that. Yeah, that's the best way I can probably put it to you. Here's another question. Was I proud of who I was becoming while I was with them? That's another question you can ask yourself. Personally, no, because I knew that I had to leave behind certain, usually Christian, elements of myself to be with this person. I've been, where you've been with people where, um, they love baby Jesus, right? They even love Jesus on the cross. They love passion of the Christ Jesus. They love the giving and sacrificial lamb Jesus. But they don't realize that Jesus is coming back to judge the world at the same time. That there will be wrath, there will be hell to pay, as they say, And uh-oh. Sorry, this thing started playing too early. Oh, that was messed up. My closing credits started too quickly. Let me just move this on. This is a long one, eh? And for those of you still hanging out with me, I really appreciate it. Again, this conversation is not really, as they say, for the faint of Hearts. So, again, I'm not on here judging anybody. It's not my job. Not even preaching. I'm just discussing, and at the same time, I'm saying you can answer these questions yourself. I'm answering them myself, and I'm doing it in real time here. So I'm thinking and talking at the same time. So I can honestly say no, I wasn't proud of who I was becoming because I knew that I had to leave parts of me to the wayside just for me to be able to somehow limp along in life with this other person. And of course, as you know, the situations didn't work out because of that. You don't bring your full self, you know, and that's not a great thing. And you're not proud of it at all. Even though you may, like I do, pray every day, get down and pray, you're still not yourself when you're not bringing your whole self to the relationship. And remember, you're asking the question of yourself. If you're asking these questions of yourself at all, you're not saying, was I proud of who they were becoming, right? You're asking it of yourself, not who they were, who you were. Were you shrinking? Were you compromising? Were you over functioning? And again, sometimes for someone who's lived a life of giving and sacrifice, sometimes we think that over functioning is a good thing. But I can honestly tell you it's not. When you're doing more than you're supposed to be doing regularly, I'm not saying you never do more. I'm not saying you never overfunction in any circumstance. But when it becomes a way of life within a relationship where they're supposed to be giving and taking, then that is a problem and it won't work. Okay, next question 13. Did I shrink my standards to stay connected? That's again something you have to ask yourself. And again, for me, because again, I'm being honest and I'm being the example and I'm trying to be as honest as I can and straightforward with you here as my listener, as my friend. Um, I can honestly tell you that I for sure was shrinking my standards. Maybe it was maybe it was somebody who was destroying their body with some sort of a substance. Maybe it was alcohol, maybe it was some type of smoker, some kind of narcotic or something like that. Is that something that I mean, when it says that your body is the temple of God and you're with somebody who's destroying their body and you're trying to be with this person and you know that they're doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing, maybe they're even causing you to kind of do it because you're together and you're walking together and they're blowing smoke in your face and you're kind of like, well, hopefully they'll stop one day, or maybe they'll stop drinking, and then they won't have those fits of rage through the alcohol, or maybe they won't be so lackadaisical when it comes to taking care of what needs to be taken care of because maybe they'll stop smoking weed or whatever it is. But you understand, and that's just from a natural standpoint of things, right? Where there'll be a level of something that you'll have to kind of put to the side for you guys to get together and to be together. um let's see. So I mean, if you're honest with yourself, right, sometimes we call it flexibility, but in reality it's erosion, and you're eroding. Your relationship's going to be eroding if you were and are to stand on what you believe. Okay. 14. Was I respected for my beliefs, or was I tolerated? And there's a difference, right? A lot of the time, you'll walk into the relationship, and I'm saying a person who's a Christian with say an unbeliever, or someone who says they believe, but nothing shows you that they actually believe. Nothing in their life would demonstrate that, really, besides or beyond being just moral. And there is a big difference just being moral and being a Christian. um And moral would be to, maybe society's rules, man's laws, kind of the things of nature. And then Christianity takes it up to a whole nother place. Um, and you have to reconcile what you're doing with maybe what you should be doing, or are you doing what you should be doing, right? And when you get into a relationship, a new relationship, usually at the beginning, yes, you're respected, you're giving, you're a person who does, you are a protector, you are responsible, you are conscientious. All these things come underneath the umbrella of being a believer. But there's going to be a point, if you're with someone who isn't a believer, that you're going to be tolerated to a certain extent, because some things are going to be going overboard. Maybe they won't agree with you giving tithes, or giving or what do you call it, or giving an offering when you go to church. You know what I mean? They're going to think, oh, there's a 2-drink minimum and you have to kind of nonsense that people make fun of when it comes to Christianity, is the giving. you know um it's just one of those things. There's many things, but I'm just saying, at the beginning, everything seems, as they say, hunky-dory. But eventually, some of the stuff, they're just going to have to basically tolerate you with, if they're going to stay with you, if you are, again, doing what you are called and supposed to be doing, right? And there is a big difference. Tolerance says, that's cute. Respect says that matters. And the things you do as a believer matter, right? But again, after a while, they're, yeah, he's a believer, but yeah. Anyway, if your faith is core to you, right, it can't be peripheral to them. It can't be just, stuff over there, right? It just can't be. Because, many believers don't lose people, they lose alignment and refuse to admit it. When everything's gone sideways. But a lot of the time we don't want to believe that, because it's like, okay, well, if I let this relationship pop and fizzle, and I'm not talking about a marriage, by the way. If you're married and you're married to an unbeliever, it is what it is. And you're going to have to pray for that person. You're going to have to be Christ-like with that person. You're going to have to figure out ways that you can introduce your real self to them. And hopefully, something can happen where they can be a believer as well. Or, you guys have to figure it out. So that's different. And remember, there's no way on this earth or planet I'm telling a person to leave somebody who, just because they're not a believer. That's nothing. There's nothing Christian about that. And we're not talking about abuse. We're not talking about anybody beating any wives or husbands or cheating regularly, where it's a way of life or whatever it is, and somehow you got to figure it out. No, that's not what I'm saying. We're just talking about a relationship where somebody's a believer and somebody's not a believer. That's it. So when you throw those other dynamics, decisions and rules change in a certain extent, to a certain extent. Doesn't mean you drop them like a bad habit in those instances either, because there is prayer, there is counseling, there is forbearance, there is forgiveness. It's not just I'm out of here, like so many people say. It says forgive 70 times 7, is it? A day? Or something like that. 70 times 7, something like that. Yeah. All right. Listen. Let's see. Where can I get you to? Let's see. Intimacy without unity. There's something we could talk about. And this is the part where most people want to avoid, for sure, because they know that they're generally in something that they should have no business being in. Because once intimacy enters, as I was talking about earlier, a little bit, I alluded to it earlier, once intimacy enters the picture, clarity leaves. Clarity leaves. If clarity could fly, clarity leaves the room. Sex accelerates bonding. I told you, it's not just biological, it's spiritual as well. Bonding creates perceived closeness. And that's what you're doing in those instances. I don't care how many people you've been with, you are literally attaching yourself to all of those people. Perceived closeness creates imagined permanence. And a lot of the time, these people have no designs on you at all for the rest of their lives. Or maybe they're just using you until maybe you are a bridge, but you are not the destinations. And people like to go over and ride bridges, but you are not the destination in many of these instances because unity is not the same thing as intimacy. So you got to go deeper. Question number 15. If silence can last, let's say a week, how long, wherever the silence has been, if you've gone through this part of it, what does that say about the attachment, right? If the person could not talk to you for a whole week, now, not because they're doing something, they're not doing like a fast or and still there's nowhere it says you need to not talk to your spouse for a week. So let's put that to the side, because sometimes I notice a lot of people, they bring in all kinds of weird rules, especially people who don't like intimacy and they happen to be in marriages. Like I've seen that as well, where the people will bring up all kinds of nonsense in the middle of a marriage that have nothing to do with God. You know what I mean? Like, go ahead and fast for a week if you want. But you have to understand that a lot of that stuff you need to do, it has to be with your spouse's approval in that case. And that's a whole nother, I'm not even going to get into that ball of wax just in case somebody's listening. I'm not with that at all. But we're staying with the silence part. And I'm just saying, if you're with somebody and they don't need to talk to you every day, maybe you're not married yet and they're cool with not talking to you for a whole week, that might not be your person. I'm going to be straight up. I'm going to be honest with you. That might not be your person. If there is nothing that is drawing them toward you on a regular, fairly regular daily basis, something's off. If someone can go days without checking in even, hey, how are you doing? Maybe you're sick. If they can go days without checking in and there's no urgency to see how you are or to do something for you, there's no concern, then the emotional weight is just not equal. And maybe you're going to say, well, I always check in. No, this person needs to be coming towards you as well. Think about it. And that doesn't mean that you're unworthy, right? It just means that the investment levels were or are different. Next question. Was I or am I emotionally overfunctioning while they were or they are under investing? Overfunctioning looks like this, in case you're wondering. You initiate more, maybe all the time. You give more. And again, it's not the amount. It's not the amount. Maybe you can give a steak dinner every time you meet or once a week, and maybe this person can only afford to give you a piece of gum every day. If you are being considered regularly out of what they have, whatever that is, if they're giving you nothing and you are giving them everything or a lot from what you have, that's overfunctioning. It's not the amount, right? So you give more. Maybe you reassure them more. Maybe you plan more. Maybe you fix more. Underinvesting looks calm, unbothered, unpressured. Over time, one person carries the structure. The other person enjoys the structure, whatever structure that is. Yeah. And here is one thing that stings. Next question, 17. Did I mistake vulnerability for permanence? Just because someone shares pain, right? There's a lot of people willing to share pain. And I told you, as a believer, you're going to attract a lot of people who are hurt, a lot of people who are broken, a lot of people who are mentally unstable. Just because someone shares pain does not mean they are choosing you. They are hurt. And by your nature, by your new nature, even, you are someone who goes about trying to heal others. And just because someone cries with you does not mean they are building with you. It just means they're hurt and they're looking for someone who wants to make them feel better. Vulnerability can be real and still not be an equal commitment. Next question. Did I try to rescue someone instead of discern them? Right. Rescuers feel strong. And if you have the desire for it, you probably feel needed, right? You feel important. There's a gap that you're filling, probably, a space you're filling, a responsibility you're feeling. There's something that you're doing. But rescue is not romance, it's imbalance. And I know sometimes when you're rescuing someone, romance comes out of it. It's kind of like the what is it, the Nightingale effect, where people fall in love with their nurses and their doctors because they're healing them. You get it? It makes sense. But you can't save someone into loving you. That's not a thing. And you cannot disciple someone into alignment. If they are not surrendered to the same authority, it's just not going to happen. Now, they may surrender themselves to the same authority. That can happen. So, but just understand that you can't do it. You can't force it. Which gets us to the next question. Was I hoping my loyalty would convert them? And this one's subtle. I know that I've been kind of flowing with it lately. I'm not dragging as I was before, but I'm just trying to get to the nitty gritty and keep it moving, as they say. But was I hoping my loyalty would convert them? And I can say honestly, for me, I can't say convert them. Maybe convert them to me. Maybe as I was doing and being loyal and being helpful and being giving and all these different things, they'll be like, wow, this is a valuable guy. This guy tries to do so much for me, and he's a loving, and some people will go for that. It might not bring them to the mountaintop. It might not shoot them to the moon, but a lot of people respect that. A lot of people appreciate that. But still, there's a difference. And this is subtle. If I show consistency, if I show patience, if I show generosity, maybe they'll rise to meet me, right? But transformation is not contagious through effort. It is voluntary through surrender. And next, question number 20. Was I loved or was I useful? Now, this one, I tend to, you hope. You hope. I mean, I think in every case, people hope that the person loved them. Even if you don't love them, you hope they loved you at least. And you gotta kind of sit with that a little bit. But in a real situation, I think I would honestly tell you, I believe that I was useful. I don't think there was love in pretty much any of my situations. In most cases, you know, you can tell. There's a difference between being appreciated and being necessary. you know Usefulness feels close, when you do. Maybe you wash the dishes, maybe you clean, maybe you wash the clothes, maybe you fill up the cars with gas, maybe you pay all the bills, maybe you iron the clothes, maybe you mow the lawn, maybe you shovel the snow, maybe you move around furniture, maybe you buy furniture, maybe you financially support, maybe you do all of these different things, maybe you offer it up. You know what I mean? You give it up. Good. And you serve a purpose, right? But what happens if you're not able to do that? What if you lose your job? What if your car breaks down? What if you're physically unable to lift or perform? If the usefulness disappears, right? Does the connection remain? And that's as plain as I can honestly put it. Whatever it is that you give up, whatever it is that you do, whatever it is that you offer, whatever it is that you supply, if you are unable to do those things for that person, does your connection continue? Does it maintain? Maybe even get better? Or does it disappear, pop and fizzle? And that answer right there is clarity. And I'm not saying, oh, well, stop this and stop that and test the person, put them through the test. No, 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 no. You will know this without having to run somebody through the ringer of your tests and make them run the gambit or walk the plank, however you look at it. Okay. Lastly, well, pretty close to that. Lastly, the ego wound. Now we can talk about something men rarely admit: humiliation. You see, rejection is one thing, and it stings. It's all at once. But humiliation is another thing. It lasts a lot longer than rejection. And maybe you were rejected and humiliated. Heartbreak says, I miss them. Humiliation now says, how did I misread this? I feel like an idiot. So, question 21. Am I grieving that person or the version of myself that felt finally chosen? Sometimes you don't miss them. You miss who you were when you believed you were valued by them. You can sit back now after you've been humiliated, maybe, and you could say, well, I knew that wasn't exactly right. I knew they weren't exactly this or that. But there was a point in time, maybe in that first 3 months, where everything I thought was perfect and I thought I was chosen, but you knew things were off. Even sometimes, like, just naturally speaking, sometimes you gloss over certain things that you would prefer. And I'm just being natural for a second. Maybe this person offered you all of these things, but you knew they weren't exactly right. Maybe they weren't even your type, right? Maybe they were fatter than you thought. Maybe they had a fat neck. Maybe they had bad teeth. Maybe they had more gray hair than you thought they had until one day the light shined on it. Like, maybe there's so many different things that you kind of glossed over because you were useful, because you seemed to be chosen. And then all of a sudden you found out you weren't really chosen. You were just convenient at the time. And you glossed over a bunch of things that if you actually were to look at it at face value, normally you wouldn't even give that person the time of day, as they say. Next question. What part of my past rejection got triggered here? For me, I can say it was being psychologically or emotionally bullied as a kid. Not physically, but psychologically, which is difficult, right? You always figure, if you do, if you help, if you give, if you're nice, if you do well, and whatever it is, maybe it's a sport or whatever, or you sing well, or you dance well, and you're in a dance competition or something, and you're in a dance crew and you dance really well, and you beat the person that comes up against you, or whatever it is. If you do well, then maybe you'll be chosen or allowed to hang around at least. This is not just about today. It's layered. When someone withdraws, does it does it feel familiar to you when it happens, when the person pulls back? Do you feel that in your little girl, your little boyhood somewhere? Does it echo in your childhood, someone would say? Your teen years, previous relationships and years past, maybe as an adult, but something smells the same. Sorry. Maybe there's like some unresolved wounds that you already have. And as they say, unresolved wounds really attach fast because they're looking to be healed. They need to be covered, right? Like a cut. You ever, I don't know, like you ever have to put a band-aid on a cut and then the band-aid gets attached to the cut because it's just trying to get some protection. Yeah. So it's the same thing with the emotional scars and wounds that we have. Sometimes we just look to be covered and we're not really concerned. The hurt is just trying to be covered. It's not really concerned at the time while it's not healed what it's being covered by. It just wants to be covered by anything. Anything will do as long as it can lay over it. Yeah. 23. Do I equate sacrifice with value? I can say honestly, I did. I would that's where you had me doing this, that, and the other thing. I was doing all the so-called guy jobs and the girl jobs. I was doing everything I could do to make things better. And if you're a person like me, maybe you do equate sacrifice with value. If I give more, am I worth more? No. If I endure more pain, more torture, more tiredness, more back struggles and muscle aches, emotional pain and neglect, am I deeper? Nah. That belief right there is very, very dangerous and detrimental to you because it trains you to overpay emotionally, physically, or whatever it is, financially. You're just trying to be a part. So you're going to do your part and their part just to be around. So 24 is like, was I truly loved or was I just positioned? And yeah, maybe you were just taking up space. That's why I think for myself, I was just taking up space. And I did it well for long enough for it to seem like it was something. And it's worse if you entangle yourself with someone who would classify themselves as broken and supposedly you help them heal. And sometimes you never really hear them declare that they've been healed or you've healed them up, or maybe they'll stay at it, say it at some point, probably if they're trying to get you to stay. But um, usually that pain, a lot of the time, many people are not healed and they get into the next relationship. And sometimes it's with someone who is of the healing persuasion, you know? You see, positioned is strategic and loved is relational. Positioned people are kept until they are not needed, right? You're the doer, you're the giver, you're the protector, you're the supplier. But when you've given and protected and healed and supplied and all these other things and they don't need those things anymore, that's what they're going to do away with you. Yeah, you signed that paper or you did this or did that for them. And now it's done and they have it. It's like, I don't really need you anymore. See a lot of people driving around in cars that are co-signed and houses that live in that are co-signed. And because they're co-signed and everything is cool, you'll have no use until they need to re-up. Don't find that out the hard way. Loved people are pursued. So you can simply ask yourself, were you being pursued? Are you being pursued, or are you chasing? Next one, this one will probably hit. If they returned today, would I trust them or just feel relieved that they were back? After all that you've been through, ask yourself that. If they returned today, would I trust them? Or would I just be relieved that I haven't been rejected? I've finally been chosen, but would you trust them? You see, relief is not reconciliation. Relief is ego soothing. Trust is rebuilt slowly. If relief is your first reaction, you are still attached to validation. Sorry for all the sounds, guys. Next, 26th. Do I want them back, or do I want the power dynamic reversed? Because you probably feel powerless. And this is crucial. I think in most cases, you really got to sit with it, you know? For different reasons, you might say, oh, yeah, well, I want them back because I don't want to be in so many relationships. I don't want to be the office mattress, or I don't want to get around or be around or been around. So for that, sometimes people want them back for that alone. But again, that's kind of like because you feel like your power has been taken. Or do you actually want that person back? It's something that you can only answer for yourself. And it's crucial. But it's also crucial that you're honest with yourself. Is it about love, or is it about not wanting to be the one who cared more? Because you feel like the loser when they leave you, right? And power feels good. And being discarded feels small and horrible. So sometimes we don't want the person, we want the upper hand. And that's ego, not intimacy. Number 5, segment number 5, alignment and authority. Now we bring it back to structure. You can't expect someone to submit to a word that they don't believe, never read, or never heard. You can't expect spiritual discipline from someone who does not acknowledge spiritual authority. Won't happen. And you can't expect a covenant from someone operating in options. So here are final thoughts, really, final questions. Where did I override conviction for companionship? So you have to look at your own situation, right? Did I just say, we'll leave this over there, leave that over there because we have good companionship and we have likes and and we offset this and that, and she's my yin to my yang, and yada yada yada. And of course, loneliness is very persuasive, right? Who wants to be alone? But loneliness is not authority. It has to be more than that. Number 28. If I had obeyed my convictions fully, would this relationship have progressed the same way? I can honestly say no, because I would have had to have dropped this, that, and the other person very quickly once I found out that there was no substance behind whatever they had to say. Now, maybe it was somebody who was a called a so-called baby Christian even. But the question is, are they trying to read the Bible so that they can learn and get milk and be fed the word so they know what it is that they say they believe, what they're standing on? In other words, if you say somebody, you're with somebody and they say, oh yeah, I believe what you believe, and you know that they're new or they're novices or they're babies, in whatever the faith is, and they have no intentions of moving forward, or you don't see them trying to move forward daily to come up to where you are, then eventually you're gonna have to fall back to where they are, because you're gonna be walking with a limp in that relationship. And the only way for you to walk together at the same speed, the same pace, the same acknowledgments and understandings is if you walk with a limp and start walking slower, or if they try to catch up. You got to be honest. Would it have survived full obedience to what you say you believe? If the answer is no, then the misalignment was basically foundational in your relationship. And if you're building on that foundation, then there's going to be misalignment because your misalignment was foundational. 29. Am I afraid of being alone or afraid of being unseen? Some of us, probably both. And those are different fears, though. But being alone is situational, and being unseen feels existential. Hurts your your very soul. But you have to understand that you are seen by the Almighty, and you're generally seen by other believers if you are around other believers, right? Yeah. But alone, that can come and go. And the last question: who am I when I stop trying to earn love? And that question really resets everything. If you remove your performative ways, if you remove all of your giving and doing, if you remove you pursuing and chasing them, right? You're not doing any of those things. Who are you? Because if you have to earn love from someone, that's not covenant, and it's not moving in a covenant type direction. Because covenant is mutual surrender under a shared belief or authority. Anything else, you're negotiating something. You're making a deal, right? And the question is, who are you making that deal with? You know what I'm saying. And this is where we pause before we end this thing. Just got to think about that for a while, though. Listen, what rejection really reveals. Rejection exposes more than incompatibility. It exposes alignment. You can survive heartbreak, you can survive disappointment, you can survive humiliation, but you can't live long term in misalignment without something inside of you eroding or dying. If you believe the Bible is true, and it's not just inspirational, not just symbolic, but true, then you already know something. You are not your own. You were bought with a price. And that means your dating life is not neutral. Your sexuality is not casual. Your standards are not optional. You can struggle. You can fail. You can fall short, because we all have, right? But you can't build something holy on a foundation that ignores holiness and expect peace. And this is where people misunderstand. This is not about perfection. It's not. It's about direction. Where are you going? Are you moving towards obedience or are you negotiating it? Because once you are genuinely born again, your spirit convicts you. The spirit convicts you. And when you override conviction long enough, you lose your peace. You're not having life more abundantly. That disturbance you feel after rejection, it's not only heartbreak, it's also misaligning. That's a word. It's misalignment settling. Here's the truth. Most people will not say. If someone is not governed by the same authority, the same belief system, the same God as you, long-term harmony is impossible. Outwardly, it might look fine. Photos look fine, conversations look fine, you might even have some good laughs. People say you look cute together. But inside, one person is definitely going to have to shrink. Shrinking standards, shrinking boundaries, shrinking obedience. And shrinking spiritually for companionship is too high of a cost. Rejection may feel humiliating, but misalignment would have suffocated you slowly anyway. So maybe the silence is not cruelty. Maybe it's just clarity. You don't need to flip the dynamic, take control, or get your control back, power back. You don't need revenge. You don't need them to miss you. You don't need to prove anything. You need alignment. Because if God is truly first in your life, then anyone who stands beside you must also answer to the same God, and you'll have to answer to him regardless. Every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess that he is Lord. Otherwise, someone will always feel tension, and that tension will not disappear through chemistry. It will only disappear through compromise, and compromise will always collect interest later. Trust me, if you paid it, you know. So here we land. Check it out. You are not worthless because someone detached from you. You are not weak because you gave. You are not foolish because you hoped, even if maybe you hoped in the wrong thing and you stopped hoping where you should have been hoping in the first place. But you are responsible for your alignment. Rejection doesn't define you, but how you adjust afterwards will. This is not the mountaintop, by the way. This is recalibration for many of us. This is the moment you decide, I will not trade obedience for intimacy. I will not dilute conviction for connection. I will not shrink for companionship. Episode 313. 30 questions after rejection. You got to sit with them, and maybe you'll need to listen to them again. I don't think I started off so well either, but anyway, let them expose what you needed to expose. And don't rush to replace anybody or replace silence with someone new. It's not worth it. Alignment first, always. Listen, if you play by the devil's rules, you will not win as a born again believer. You might get chemistry, you might get attention, but you will lose when it comes to your peace. And sex does bond, covenants bind. Bonding without covenant creates illusion, and illusion always creates suffering. Next, if someone can go silent for a week, that silence is not confusion, it's clarity. Next, you don't miss them, you miss the version of yourself that felt chosen. You can't build something holy on a foundation that ignores holiness. expect it to last. Two cannot walk unless they agree. That's not romantic advice, that's spiritual law. Next, sometimes rejection isn't punishment, it's just correction. Next, if you have to shrink your convictions to keep someone, you're not in love, you're negotiating. 9, relief is not reconciliation. If they came back today and you just feel relieved, you're still addicted to validation. And lastly, don't flip the dynamic. Just fix the alignment. All right, guys, that's it for today. It definitely has been a different episode of You're Probably Right. I will not deny, but I can say that many times on this podcast because I kind of, whittle through my life a little bit and things, again, that I've experienced or learned or, whatever it is experienced. Sometimes I don't stay so close, even though I didn't read any scripture really, even though I probably quoted some a little bit here and there. Again, I don't speak here as an authority. Anything you want to understand from the scriptures, you have to read them. You have to sit under the teaching of someone who exposits, opens the scripture to you. Not someone who's talking a whole bunch of make-believe stuff, but actually lets the scriptures explain the scriptures and presents it to you in a way for you to understand. And you need to spend time with other believers. Right. Anyhow, until next time, y'all, this is MCM signing off, and this is You're Probably Right. Please support the podcast if you can. And right now, the only support I ask is that you follow. If you would be so kind, that would help me out a lot. Anyhow, take care. Until next time, peace out. Hey, come check out You're Probably Right podcast. Society is getting more unpredictable every day, but at the same time, predictable in its unpredictability. Say that 4 times real fast. Come with me as I attempt to find clarity in all the fog while staying way outside the box and kicking the box way down the road with my size 12 ducks. I use the Bible, experience, education, fortune, misfortune, life's lessons, life's mistakes to sort through all the mess. I talk about news, God, God, self-help, sports, sickness, health, music, parenting, love, humbleness, hurt, pain, joy, and all the things that might make you say, I never thought of it that way. Hopefully, anyway. Also, I take a stab at answering tough and not so tough questions, and all the while understand that, listen, sometimes you end up in the hot seat and there's no thermostat. Well, that's how it is here. And because there's no topic, very few topics off the table, Torontonians will understand that Doug Ford reference there. Hopefully the podcast will be helpful and uplifting. And hey, maybe you'll find your own private Idaho here somewhere. Hope to see you soon.
Ooh, yeah. Listen. It's getting late and I'm still wide awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the space you take. One day you're here, next day you're gone, and I'm just trying to understand where we went wrong. You only love me in the middle of the night, then you fade away with the morning light. I need to know, is this for real? Tell me how you truly feel. Oh, yeah. I give my all, you give me half your heart. say the words, but we just stay so far apart. These mixed signals are tearing me down, lost in the silence when you're not around. Tell me how you feel. How you really feel. Is any of this real? Just tell me, yeah. Tell me, baby. Oh. You only love me in the middle of the night. In the night. Then you fade away with the morning light. Morning light. I need to know, is this for real? Tell me how you truly feel. Oh.